I mean, you sort of tend to forget that if you rank the top 4 threats against the UK, North Korea is in the sort of top 4, which, considering how small North Korea is, and also the fact that the bulk of people in the country don't even have access to the internet, that's quite a remarkable turn of events. So the whole point of the podcast and the book was sort of answer the question, why has that happened, but also how have they done that?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Hacking Humans podcast, where each week we look behind the social engineering scams, phishing schemes, and criminal exploits that are making headlines and taking a heavy toll on organizations around the world. I'm Dave Bittner from the CyberWire, and joining me is Joe Kerrigan from the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute. Hello, Joe.
Hi, Dave.
Got some good stories to share this week, and later in the show, Carol Terrio joins us. She's speaking with Jeff White about his new book, The Lazarus Heist: From Hollywood to High Finance, Inside North Korea's Global Cyber War. So who's got the advantage in cybersecurity, the attacker or the defender? Intelligent people differ on this, but the conventional wisdom is that the advantage goes to the attacker. But why is this? Stay with us and we'll have some insights from our sponsor, KnowBe4, that put it into perspective. All right, Joe, before we kick things off with our stories, we have a little bit of follow-up and feedback here. I guess I will go ahead and read this as the official reader.
Yes.
This is from a listener who goes by the name of John, and John says, "Hello, Dave and Joe. First off, I love your show. You both do a great job communicating security-related information and stories. Keep up the good work." Well, thank you, John. You can write us anytime.
Yes, please do. Write us more often. Tell us how awesome we are.
John says, last year I wrote in, well, there you go,
yes,
about a hacking scheme my son was dealing with and how he potentially compromised his driver's license. We live in Colorado.
I remember that.
It was easy enough to go to the local DMV and get a new license so the old one could not be used. Great. This year, I was notified my driver's license and other personal data had been exposed in the T-Mobile breach. Interestingly, I was notified by a monitoring service I subscribed to and not by T-Mobile. I thought there were changes in the reporting requirements, but apparently not involving the notification to people impacted. Also, I find it interesting that T-Mobile seems to be acting like nothing happened. Other companies I deal with who had security breaches have proactively reached out to notify and offer monitoring services for some time period, while T-Mobile seems to be taking the ostrich approach. But I digress. I'll just add as an aside here that perhaps it's because T-Mobile has so many breaches that it's hard for them to keep up.
Maybe that's why.
But back to John. He writes, "My first thought was, why did T-Mobile have my information, since the last time I used them was over 20 years ago? My second thought was I should go to the DMV to void my current one and get a new one, since it was relatively easy based on my son's experience. Well, apparently something changed in the past year. Now, to get a license reissued, it requires a notarized affidavit and a police report. This means you cannot get a license reissued until after you have experienced some form of identity theft the police are willing to handle and report. Apparently, instead of being helpful, the Colorado government would like its citizens to experience some injury beyond the annoyance of dealing with the DMV.
Yeah, that in and of itself is an injury.
Injury to insult.
Yes.
I would be interested in hearing your views on this.
I have a few things.
Okay.
Number one, if the last time you did business with T-Mobile was 20 years ago, then wouldn't your license have long expired?
That's true. Yes, the license they would have on file.
Yeah, I don't.
Would be long gone.
I don't know that I'd be concerned about it if this is truly 20-year-old information. Maybe John has some other information in here that that's not clear, or maybe he has another concern.
No, good point.
Aside from that, there are two main concerns here. Number one, why do companies keep your data forever? If you haven't done business with that company in 20 years, why do they still have it? That's a valid question.
Yes.
I would like somebody from T-Mobile to answer that question.
Yeah.
Maybe the next step is for you to call T-Mobile and go, hey, listen, my data was breached when you guys got breached and I haven't done business with you for 20 years. I'm going to send you a letter that commands you or instructs you to delete my data since we don't have a business relationship anymore. I don't know if you can get away with that at all. I don't know if you have any force or, if there's no right to be forgotten in the United States yet.
Right.
Soon there will be.
Yeah.
When you will have the force of law behind that request. But you can still make the request. And then I'd be in touch with my legislators to ask about this. What's going on here? You need to make it so that if I think I've been breached, I can go out and get my license replaced before I suffer an identity theft incident.
Yeah. I also wonder for John, what if he just went to DMV and said, I lost my license?
That's a good point.
I guess what he's looking for is like a reissue with a different number on it, I guess, as opposed to just a reprint of the existing license, which presumably has the compromised information, perhaps. I think that's the line of thinking John is following here.
Yeah.
So
I don't know how it works in Colorado, but I know in Maryland, if I go out and get a new license, I have the exact same license number.
I see.
And in fact, the license number is a Soundex that's actually easy to derive. And because my son and I have the same name, our driver's license numbers are almost identical.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. I got a notice. Probably 6 months ago of a data breach. And it was from an organization that I had not done business with since I was about 11 years old, Joe.
Really?
40 years. I had not heard from this organization. And I got a letter one day in the mail that said, hey, guess what? We had a data breach. And sort of to your point, I was like, what are you doing with my information still on file? It's been 40 years.
Yeah.
This is the first I hear from you.
Right.
After 40 years.
Gee, Dave, we miss you.
No.
What does an 11-year-old want that a 51-year-old wants?
Yeah, money.
Yeah, money.
That's it, money. Yeah, so the other thing I will add here is that a lot of privacy folks that I've spoken to have suggested that you consider the data of your customers to be radioactive.
Right. It's a nuclear material.
Yes. If you have too much of it in one place, bad things happen.
Yes.
So get rid of it. Have some sort of rules in place where after X number of years, it gets destroyed. I know it's easy to be a pack rat with this since storage is basically free these days.
Right.
We all do it, right? Mm-hmm. We all never throw anything away.
That's right.
I have a Google Drive to prove it.
I've got way too much. I actually had to start paying Google $1.99 a month so that I could keep stuff on my Google Drive. Ugh. And I already pay for a terabyte of storage at Microsoft.
Ugh, the humanity.
I just haven't moved it over. Right. I said, no, it's just easier to pay the $2 a month.
Yeah, it's just exactly. But if you're an organization, you get yourself in trouble.
Yeah.
So to your point, Joe, hopefully things are moving in the right direction. We'll see some legislation about this, and maybe we'll be headed in the right direction. So good questions, John. Thank you for writing in. We do appreciate it, and also for the kind words. We would love to hear from you. If you have a question for us, you can write us. It's hackinghumans@thecyberwire.com.
Also, that's the address where you can send your catches of the day.
Ah, excellent. All right, well, let's dig into our stories this week. I will start things off for us. My story comes from ZDNet. This is written by Liam Tung, and it's titled 2,000 Arrests in Crackdown on Social Engineering and Business Email Scams.
When this came across my newsfeed this week, a big smile went across my face, Dave.
It's good news.
It
is.
Good
news. So the fine folks at Interpol announced that they had raided over 1,700 locations over the period of about 2 months. They seized $50 million in fraudulent gains and arrested about 2,000 people, which they described as operators, fraudsters, and money launderers as part of their crackdown on social engineering and business email compromise rackets. This was an international effort. They say some 76 countries participated in the crackdown against organized crime and these social engineering scams. They were going after people who were taking part in telephone deception, romance scams, email deception, financial crime, all that good stuff. In addition, they identified about 3,000 suspects, and there were 4,000 bank accounts that were frozen.
It's a lot of bank accounts.
It's a lot. And
only $50 million. That's not a lot of money for this kind of crackdown, but I imagine the money moves through these criminal organizations very quickly.
Yeah, and if you can, that was the question I had for you was, to what degree do you think something like this makes a difference?
What I think makes the biggest difference is the fact that you've arrested 1,700 people and got 2,000 more people to arrest.
Mm-hmm.
That makes the difference.
Yeah.
That's going to be the incentive or disincentive, if you will, to not participate in this. The idea that these guys have is, hey, we can just get away with this. We do this because we're operating outside of the force of the laws of the countries we're targeting. Because they usually target more wealthy countries, and I get the wealth disparity issue.
Yeah.
But that doesn't excuse criminality. So they work in an environment where law enforcement may not be as tough as it is here in the United States. I mean, we have some pretty tough law enforcement in this country to the point where there are some problems with it, right?
Okay.
Like I'm not happy with the amount of surveillance that goes on in this country, and there are other issues as well that I'm not happy with. But so it's if you're in the U.S., it's pretty easy for law enforcement to catch you doing financial crimes in the U.S. Outside of the country, you may feel like they're never going to be able to catch me,
Right.
and that gives you that incentive to do this.
Right.
So I think to answer your question, that as I have always done, I've given a long answer to a very simple question. But your simple question is, does this matter? I think, yes, it does, because these people are going to have to interact with their legal system now, and that is never a good situation for anybody.
I think it's good to have them looking over their shoulders, too.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
If I'm running that phone bank in one location and the folks down the street got collared, I'm going to think twice about it. Maybe it's time to move on to something else.
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of these companies have legitimate businesses, and they run the legitimate businesses as call centers. And then they have another room where all the scammers work, right? And that is probably more profitable, but maybe it's not worth spending 10 years in prison for.
Right. All right. Well, good to share some good news. So I thought I would pass that along. The guys and gals at Interpol doing some good work with all their international partners. It's good to see that this stuff is being paid attention to, and there are some crackdowns. I think it's a good reminder. All right, Joe, that's my story. What do you have for us this week?
Dave, my story is a reminder that the bad guys have calendars hanging up in their offices with the seasons of hacking on.
Okay.
Right. And I like to say, think of it as an evil liturgical calendar where there is no such thing as ordinary time.
Okay.
It's always some scam season. And last week was Father's Day season.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
Hack season, scam season,
Yeah.
hacking season, scam season. My story comes from Jennifer Meyerhands over at the BBC. And the title of the story is Heineken Says Father's Day Beer Contest is a Scam.
Uh-oh.
So there is a scam going around on WhatsApp where you get this picture of a cooler pack of Heineken, and it says, "Hello, welcome to the Heineken Beer Father's Day Contest. Take the quiz, find the hidden prize, and win a cooler full of Heineken beer." Now, part of me goes, what's second prize? 2 coolers full of Heineken beer?
Oh, now, Joe. You're a rascal.
I'm not a big fan of Heineken, but it's not. If somebody handed me a Heineken beer at a party, I wouldn't turn it down.
Yeah.
I would ask, is this the best you have?
And that's why you don't get invited to many
And that's
parties,
why I don't get invited to parties, right? But interesting on this scam is that there's a thing at the bottom that says 250 gifts left. And if you go, there's another picture here that says Heineken Beer Father's Day Contest 2022, 5,000 coolers of Heineken, and the URL ends in .ru. Right? I don't know if you are aware of where Heineken is made, but it's not made in Russia.
No.
So naturally, Heineken is very upset with this, as they should be, right? And they're telling everybody it's a scam. Delete it immediately. We're aware of this phishing scam circulating on social networks. It's not sanctioned by Heineken, and we have alerted the relevant authorities.
Right.
Now, one of the places that will never have a crackdown on these kind of scams, one of the places where these guys do operate with impunity when they go outside of the country is Russia. Russia doesn't cooperate with foreign law enforcement at all.
Right.
So I think the fact that this is linking to a .ru URL is a clear indicator that it might be being run out of Russia.
It's a red flag.
Yeah, It's a red flag.
Yep.
So a couple of things that are interesting in here. One is from one quote is from Ian McShay, who I think we've had on this show.
Sounds familiar.
From Arctic Wolf.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And he says the response, the message often says only the first X number of people will win, and that lends to the credibility of the scam. Online threats or onlinethreatalert.com said the scam is spreading like wildfire and it was difficult to track within private messages. WhatsApp and their parent company Meta, I guess, are saying that you should report these fraudulent messages to them so they can take some action. What that action is, I don't know. I don't have any hope in that producing anything when you're talking about Meta.
Right.
I just don't have a lot of faith in that company as a whole. That's a personal opinion.
Yeah.
Not, I'm not telling anybody anything they don't already know. Anyway.
They've earned it.
They've earned it, right.
Yeah.
So my point of picking the story is there's always something, right? It's always something. What's it going to be next week? Hey, Independence Day giveaways, right? Because Independence Day is coming up here in the United States. Or let's see, new fiscal year, right? For a lot of companies, they begin fiscal years on July 1st. That's where a lot of accounting scams might be coming in.
Yep.
Right? And all that information on publicly traded companies is out there on the internet, and you can see when somebody's fiscal year begins and ends if they're publicly traded.
Right.
So these are the kind of things you need to be aware of. What's going on around you, what's going on at this point in time, and how these phishing scams work and how they usually start. Just ignore them. And
it's like retailers,
right.
You got where do we go? Christmas, Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day,
right? Yeah,
Easter, 4th of July,
Memorial Day, President's Day,
Thanksgiving, and then Christmas, and it's all over again.
Yeah,
right? There's never a time when the store is not decorated.
Yes, exactly.
And this is similar to that.
Yeah, car dealerships are like that too.
Yeah.
There's always some sales event going on. It's always Toyota-thon.
Right.
It seems.
Yes.
I don't know. Jen is always saying something about some sales events going on at Toyota dealerships.
Right.
And I kind of object to that. I almost look at that as it's an insult on my intelligence, right? When it's coming from a retailer. But for some reason, when it's coming from a criminal enterprise, I'm like, I should be cautious of this. And I wonder if those two are related in my head, right? Like I'm cautious of it because it's coming from a retailer, but I'm cautious of it because it's coming from a scammer as well.
Yeah.
I wonder if that provides me any protection, like any mental protection from these kind of things, like these Jedi mind tricks.
It just rubs you the wrong way.
It does it rubs me the wrong way. There are a lot of things that rub me the wrong way.
Yeah.
And this is one of them. Another one is when somebody tries to instantly pretend there's a rapport between the two of you, you and somebody else.
Really?
That makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up.
Is that right?
Yeah.
By the way, I wanted to tell you what a lovely shirt you're wearing today.
Dave, coming from you, it's fine. You and I do have a good rapport. You and I have years of working together. It's fine. You can tell me that.
I see.
Right? If somebody else comes up and says...
But when you walk into the car dealership and the guy says, hello there, sir, what a lovely shirt you're wearing today.
I'm like, I'm not here to talk about my shirt and you know it and don't... There you go. That's a perfect example, Dave. Thank you. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. All right. Well, interesting story. We will have a link to that in the show notes. Again, we would love to hear from you. You can write us at hackinghumans@thecyberwire.com. All right, Joe, it's time to move on to our catch of the day.
Funny that our second story was about Heineken because our catch of the day also comes from the Netherlands. Joram writes, hi, Jave and Doe. Like we're the Heaven's Gate cult, right? It's T and Doe. Hi, Joe and Dave. I have my own cybersecurity business, and I'm always trying to find news sources to learn more. I fairly recently discovered your podcast in that search. I really love the show. It's both very informative as well as fun and easy to listen to. Well, those are kind words. Thank you, Joram.
Very nice.
Appreciate it. When checking my spam folder in my personal inbox, which I do on occasion, I came across a fun but futile attempt to scam for money. Dave, why don't you read this? It starts with, my greetings.
I am Miss Julia Iris, a retired economic operator hospitalized for health reasons. I suffer from heart disease, and the results of some of my medical tests showed that my days on Earth are numbered. While I have in my bank a sum of money of 3,425,000 euros. Unfortunately, I have no family or children who will be able to benefit from this money. I was advised by the Catholic bishop and my spiritual guide to inherit it from a person who I must choose at random, who can put these funds to good use. The reason why I'm contacting you today by email, given that I am under hospitalization in order to live the rest of my life, you are therefore the beneficiary of 3,425,000 euro. I offer it to you from the bottom of my heart. I just ask for prayers in return so that my soul may rest in peace on the last day. Please write to me by email. May the Lord God, creator of heaven and earth, hear your prayers. Amen.
All right. So one of the things that Joram said, and this stuck out to me when I read it as well, is there's a line in here, I was advised by the Catholic bishop and my spiritual guide to inherit it from a person whom I must choose at random.
Uh-huh.
All right. I don't know if you know how a lot of charitable organizations work.
Yeah.
Right? But they run on money.
It's the unfortunate reality of
Correct.
the world in which we live, right?
And there are many people who, when they die, they leave a large gift to a charitable organization.
Sure.
And people do that with their churches.
Yeah.
And I find it difficult to believe that a bishop would recommend randomly picking somebody to give money to, as opposed to saying, perhaps you should make a postmortem donation to the church.
That's right, exactly. You'd think at the very least he would throw his hat in the ring
Right,
and say,
yes.
Maybe you could split it between us and something else that is special to you.
Yes, absolutely. Which is, if you're a Catholic, that's not a bad thing to do with your money.
No judgment at all. I
Yeah.
mean, the church, you gotta keep the lights on.
Right. But I find it difficult to believe that they would say, just give it to some rando.
Right. No, we're good.
Yeah.
We're good.
I could, I picture a guy in the, the big pointy hat with the long cane and
gold scepter.
Yeah, gold scepter walking by the hospital door and Your Eminence, what should I do with this money? Oh, just give it to some rando.
Yeah. No, we're good.
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Joram, for sending that in. That's a great catch of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and again, we would love to hear from you. You can send it to us at hackinghumans@thecyberwire.com. Now let's return to our sponsor's question about the attacker's advantage. Why do the experts think this is so? It's not like a military operation where the defender is thought to have most of the advantages. In cyberspace, the attacker can just keep trying and probing at low risk and low cost, and the attacker only has to be successful once. And as KnowBe4 points out, email filters designed to keep malicious spam out have a failure rate of over 10%. That sounds pretty good. Who wouldn't want to bat nearly 900? But this isn't baseball. If your technical defenses fail in 1 out of 10 tries, you're out of luck and maybe out of business. The last line of defense is your human firewall. You can test that firewall with KnowBe4's free phishing test, which you can order up at knowbe4.com/fishtest. That's knowbe4.com/fishtest. All right, Joe, it is always a treat to welcome Carol Theriault back to the show. And this week, she is speaking with author Jeff White about his new book, The Lazarus Heist, From Hollywood to High Finance, Inside North Korea's Global Cyber War. Here's Carol Theriault.
So today we are talking with Jeff White, investigative journalist, auteur, podcaster, climber. Anything else?
No, that about covers it, yes. Not for one man.
Well, today we are going to talk about your upcoming book, The Lazarus Heist, From Hollywood to High Finance, Inside North Korea's Global Cyber War. That's quite a title, Jeff. It's snappy.
It is. They always ask you to come up. You come up with the title and you work really hard for the title. And they say, we need another bit after it. We need colon something or other. And then you spend weeks thinking of that. I'd rather just call it The Thing and then that'll be it. But unfortunately, you have to describe then what the book is actually about.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll refer to it as the Lazarus Heist for time. Now, this book of yours was adapted from the BBC hit show Lazarus Heist podcast, which you host.
Co-host, yeah.
Yes, with Gene Lee. And I wanted to ask you, what made you decide to go down the literary route?
The idea originally, I think, when we developed the podcast, they said, "Oh, well, we'll try and maybe get a book out of this as well." And I sort of thought, "Yeah, we'll see what happens with that. I'll believe it when I see it." But fair enough, audiences really seem to like the podcast. The BBC were very happy with the podcast, and then went to a publisher, and they end up being Penguin, and they sort of thought, well, there's much more to tell. That was part of my pitch. There's lots more to tell beyond the podcast. There's all those little wrinkles and things you can't fit into the podcast. But over and above that, the North Koreans have been accused of more and more hacks. So there's always more to put in. So I think the idea was we can just do more and say more in a book, I think.
So maybe we should take a step back. And why don't you give us the gist of the Lazarus heist and why it grabbed you more than any other cyber gang stories out there?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the Lazarus Heist podcast and indeed the book is the story of how North Korea became a cyber superpower, a computer hacking superpower. I mean, you sort of tend to forget that if you ask the UK government, UK intelligence community to sort of rank the top 4 threats against the UK, it'll generally be sort of China, Russia in first and second place interchangeably, but third and fourth places are usually either Iran or North Korea. And again, change between the one and the other. So North Korea is in the sort of top 4, which, considering how small North Korea is, and also the fact that the bulk of people in the country don't even have access to the internet, that's quite a remarkable turn of events. So the whole point of the podcast and the book was sort of answer the question, why has that happened? But also, how have they done that? And so we followed through, the trail of the Lazarus Group, the so-called Lazarus Group, who are behind a lot of these hacks, who are alleged to be working on behalf of the North Korean government, to look at where they come from, where they spring from, the kind of hacks they carry out, and the evolution that's gone on, their gradual growth in tactics and effectiveness. That's really what we've been concentrating on.
Were you learning as you went, or did you have it all sorted out before you went live with the podcast and started talking about it?
No, we were learning as we go. I mean, I'd written a book a couple of years ago called Crime.com, and
right.
The Lazarus Heist story really was one chapter in Crime.com. And if you'd said to me, that chapter will make it into a 10-part podcast series, I would have said, no, it's not going to happen. I've found out everything I can about that Bangladesh bank hack that the North Koreans are accused of doing. But you find out more and more, and stuff does come to light as you make the podcast. There was this intriguing connection of a Japanese guy who ends up getting involved in the process of laundering money allegedly stolen by the North Koreans. And he was always a sort of shadowy character, and we had a few leads, but we never quite, managed to nail him down. As we were making the podcast, he sort of responded to the email and said, yeah, I'll have a chat to you. I'll do an interview. I just fell off my chair at that point and thought, will you? Okay, fair enough. So you get him on the phone and you sort of ask him some questions. So yeah, stuff always develops. And as I say, even in the course of making the second series of the podcast, we've got a second series coming out in October, we've had the Axie Infinity Ronin Bridge cryptocurrency attack being attributed to North Korea. We've had some convictions around a cryptocurrency conference that was held in North Korea. A chap in the US has been convicted for his involvement in that. There's a couple of other warrants out. So stuff just keeps developing. I hope at some stage the North Koreans just take a breather while we finish the series before doing anything else.
So your book, The Lazarus Heist, is going to be hitting the digital shelves in June. Is that right? And
the physical shelves in June. It's paper, it's audio, it's ebook, all the formats. Not mime. We've avoided mime. I thought that was a bit of too much of a challenge. modern dance.
Do you ever worry, you're covering this, you're probably going to become the Lazarus gang's biggest expert in terms of their entire life cycle. Does that worry you at all?
Well, listen, for a start, I don't know anywhere near as much as some of the technical experts we're speaking to. So in terms of how they work and what they do, there are lots of people in the world who have far more knowledge of that than I do. But yes, we take these risks extremely seriously. The BBC and Penguin take it very seriously. I mean, look, one of the stories we cover in both the podcast and the book is the hacking of Sony, which is a big media organization that did something North Korea didn't like, put together a film called The Interview, which was pretty mocking of Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea. And the North Koreans, it seems, did not like that one bit and are accused of hacking into Sony and demolishing the company for a period of time. Obviously, the BBC and Penguin are big media organizations. We're doing something that the North Koreans might not like by covering their hacking. The last thing we want is for them to put us in the same position Sony are in. So we do take this very, very seriously. Usefully, as you go along, you cover these hacks and you cover these attacks and you get an insight into what the tactics are. Depressingly, a lot of it's still phishing emails. But so that's kind of helped us, I think, stay a bit more secure, hopefully, touching wood, because we kind of know what the tactics are because we're hearing those tactics from victims. Hopefully we can keep ourselves safe against them as well.
Well, I very much hope so, because what you do is important. And thank you for sharing all your research with us.
Great to speak to you. Thanks for having me on.
Listeners, this was Jeff White, author of The Lazarus Heist, which will be available in June.
All right, Joe, what do you think?
Well, I'm glad to have Carole back on the show.
Yep.
I always like hearing her.
Yeah.
One of the things that stands out in this interview to me is that North Korea is one of the top 5 hacking nation states.
Mm-hmm.
North Korea is so prolific in hacking that Jeff can do 2 podcast series and a book on them.
Right.
Right?
Right. And I would, just as an aside, I would recommend folks check out Jeff's podcast. It's excellent.
I haven't listened to it yet, but Jeff is actually on a lot of other podcasts right now pushing this book. And I'll talk about that in a minute because this is a short interview.
Yeah.
If you want to hear longer interviews, I'll just say this now. If you want to hear longer interviews, Perry Carpenter, 8th Layer Insights, has a bonus episode. As of this recording, it's the most recent bonus episode with Jeff.
Yeah.
And Jack Resider over at Darknet Diaries also has an episode with Jeff, episode 119.
Okay.
And I'm about halfway through that episode, but I listened to the Perry Carpenter one, or the 8th Layer Insights with Perry, and that was really good.
Yeah.
And, Jack's show is always great.
Sure.
And so is Perry's, by the way. You should check out, you know what? Shameless plug for Perry's fellow cyberware. I'm also going to be on an upcoming episode of that show.
Oh, terrific.
So,
yeah, Perry's a really good storyteller.
Yeah, he is.
If you haven't checked out 8th Layer Insights, give it a listen.
But back to Jeff.
Yeah.
Something that amazes me about these hackers, the fact that Jeff can produce all this media on North Korean hackers. These hackers don't grow up with computers, right? They may not even grow up with electricity, Dave, or constant electricity. I've heard stories. I've listened to other podcasts about what it's like in North Korea, and they have. You don't get a computer.
Right.
Very few people get computers.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen stories where you go into a North Korean data center, and there's just people sitting at computers, but all they're doing is looking at the Google search screen, like that's what you're doing, what you do.
Huh.
They've loaded up Google, and they're just looking at it.
Huh. Okay.
So what they do, and I heard this on, I think it was Jack's show, Jeff said this, they take people who are good at math and they turn them into hackers. And then they send them out of the country to hack because there is no infrastructure in the country.
Oh, I see.
Right? Mm-hmm. Which is another key point about North Korea. We could not win a cyber war with North Korea, right? Because it is completely asymmetrical. They could hack and do thousands of dollars in damage, millions of dollars in damage, billions of dollars in damage to our infrastructure. And we can't do it to them because they just don't have that infrastructure.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Right? So if it's just a pure cyber war, we can't win. We just have to,
They just don't have as much to lose.
They just don't have as much to lose. Exactly.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's even within their capabilities to do it, but it's probably not within what they want to do.
Yeah.
They probably don't want to do that because it's probably not in their own interests.
No, and I think things are pretty brittle over there
They
just
are.
in general. So how much do you want to poke the bear?
What they really are interested in is keeping the money flow coming in.
Yep.
That's what they want.
Yep.
Key takeaway, North Korea, one of the most advanced nation state actors in the world, and their most frequently used tool is just phishing, right? That's why shows like this are important. That's why it's important to have security awareness training. It is probably the most efficient and effective way to get in to an organization is just by phishing.
Yeah.
That's why it's so popular and why it's such a big problem.
Yeah, and I guess I wonder, in terms of North Korea's threat, to what degree do they actually have true sophistication with the things they're developing, and to what degree are they just persistent? And they use the stuff that works,
right,
like you said, because their priority is getting the money flowing. So it's just volume of these sort of scammy things to finance their government.
Yeah, I get the impression that there are other people involved in this as well that aren't North Koreans, people that North Koreans pay.
Yeah.
I don't know if, maybe if I listen to Jeff's podcast, which I do plan on doing, there's information about that out there. I think I recall something in one of these interviews, even talking about somebody who was in Japan as part of the organization that helped them. So it seems like what they might be doing is building an international network of people to provide these tools and services to them.
Yeah, I've heard there's some coziness between them and China, for example.
Well, yeah, there is coziness between them and China, and there has been since the inception of North Korea.
Yeah.
That's kind of the point, or the Chinese point for the existence of North Korea. I'm very sad to hear that the book is not coming out in mime format, but I am perfectly happy to hear that it's not coming out in modern dance.
Well, there you go. Small miracles,
yes.
right?
I would also not like to see the book come out in ballet if you're looking for other kinds of dance I don't like.
Okay.
But modern dance and ballet are my two least favorite kinds of dance.
All right.
I love listening to ballets, though.
Duly noted.
Right.
All right. Well,
Tchaikovsky wrote some great stuff.
Again, our thanks to Carol Theriault for bringing us that interview with Jeff White. The book is The Lazarus Heist from Hollywood to High Finance, Inside North Korea's Global Cyber War, and definitely worth a look there. And we want to thank our sponsors, KnowBe4. They are the social engineering experts and the pioneers of new school security awareness training. Be sure to take advantage of their free phishing test, which you can find at knowbe4.com/fishtest. Think of KnowBe4 for your security training. All right, that is our show. We want to thank all of you for listening. Thanks to the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute for their participation. You can learn more at isi.jhu.edu. The Hacking Humans podcast is proudly produced in Maryland at the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our senior producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpeep. I'm Dave Bittner.
And I'm Joe Kerrigan.
Thanks for listening.